This video is going to talk about ratio tables. So a ratio is a comparison of two things. A ratio table is going to be comparing still two things, but this time increasing or decreasing the amount of things that we have in order to figure out how many things we would have in different situations. Let's start off by looking at this block castle. They want to know, first of all, how many blocks are needed to construct the castle. Well, I see a triangle, I see a bridge, and I see two cylinders, so that's going to be 4 blocks. Then they're asking, what is the ratio of the number of triangular blocks or triangles to the total number of blocks? So I'm comparing triangles to the total. So that would be adding up the triangles, the cylinders, the bridge, all of that. So I'm going to call that 1 triangle to 4 blocks total. Next, what you're going to see is where you're going to see this put into a ratio table. So I took triangle and I'm comparing it to the total. So that's 1 to 4. Don't forget, you can also write ratios using words, 1 to 4, or by using fractions. Nope, we just moved the whole, okay, 1 to 4. So here is the same T-chart as before that I just made on the other slide. And they want to know how many blocks are needed to make 2 castles. So in order to figure this out, first we're going to look at the triangles to blocks. That's correct. Now in order to double this, to go from 1 castle to 2 castles, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Multiply that by 2, and multiply that by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And we can check that by counting the number of blocks that are in the picture in both castles. So I see 1, 2 triangles, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shapes. Awesome! Now, what if I was going to look at how many blocks I need to make 3 castles? In order to figure out how many blocks I need to make 3 castles, I'm going to go back to the beginning. What I'm going to look at is I'm going to go back to that original number because this number was how many was needed for 1 castle. So I did the times 2 before, and then I would multiply by 3 to figure out how many blocks I would need for 3 castles. What if I was going to talk about 7 castles? Well, if there was one, let's go ahead and redraw that lovely castle for a minute, and that's pretty much exactly it. In the original castle, there was 1 triangle. So if I multiply the castle by 7, if I want to construct 7 castles, I'm also going to multiply the triangle by 7. So 1 times 7 is 7. Now, how many total blocks would I need? Now I could count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could go ahead and I could count the whole thing, or I could just multiply the total number of blocks by 7. And I could get 4 times 7, which is 28. So I would need 7 triangles and 28 total. And here you can see another way that they filled out the chart, which is going in order. Triangles increased by 1 each time, total blocks increased by 4 each time. We didn't really need this section because we went ahead and we took what we knew and we just jumped all the way down, and that will save you a lot of time. So we're going to make a ratio table with 3 rows for other blocks in the same castle. Now let's just remember what this castle looks like. Again, I guess I get to draw a whole lot in this one. So we want to know number of triangles to number of cylinders. Well, in the original castle, I see 1 triangle and 2 cylinders on either end. What happens if I want to double that castle? Well, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the original castle by 2. And I have to remember to do the same thing on both sides. That is very important to make sure that you're doing the same thing on both sides. So 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Let's go ahead and let's do another row. You know what? Let's skip another row. Let's figure out how many blocks we would need for 9 castles. Because ratio tables don't have to go in order every single time. You can change it. So if I go ahead and I multiply the castle by 9, 1 times 9 is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. And that's how many triangles and cylinders I would need for 9 castles. What happens if we take a look at the number of cylinders to the number of total blocks? So the number of cylinders in the castle was 2, 1, 2, which would mean that you would write the number 2 there and not the number 1. 2 cylinders, and how many total blocks? That's 4. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to double the castle to see what happens to the numbers. When I double the castle, I multiply by 2 on both sides. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Let's go ahead and let's multiply the next one by 1,000, just because we can. So when I go over here and I multiply by 1,000 on both sides, I'm going to get 2,000 on this side and 4,000 on that side. So there are 2 ratio tables in front of you. Go ahead, pause the video. Which one is a ratio table and which one is not? We'll talk about it when you come back. Welcome back. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at showing the work for figuring out which one of these are ratio tables. From 3 to 6, what am I multiplying by? Well, 3 times 2 is 6, so I'd be multiplying times 2 here. Am I multiplying by the same number on the other side? 1 times 2. 1 times 2 is 2. That checks out. That's awesome. Let's take a look at the next row. How do I go from 3 to 9? Well, I know that 3 times 3 is 9. Is 1 times 3 3? Yes, it is, which means we're good to go. What about on this side? 3 times 4 is 12. Is 1 times 4 4? Yes, it is, which means we're good to go. Let's go ahead and take a look at letter B. How do we go from 1 to 2? Well, from 1 to 2, we're going to go ahead and multiply by 2. Did we multiply by 2 over here? 2 times 2 is 6, not 3, which means that this is not a ratio table. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Pause the video. We'll talk about it when you come back. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at this first ratio table. What do we multiply to go from 3 to 5? 3 to 5. I can't think of a whole number that's going to work for that. Maybe I'm missing something. So I'm going to go ahead and check on the other side and then check that against what's on this side. I know that 1 times 2 is 2. So if I multiply 3 times 2, do I get 5? No, this is not a ratio table. Let's go ahead and look at the bonus. How do we go from 2 to 4? Well, I know that 2 times 2 is 4. Is 5 times 2 10? Yes, it is. Excellent. What about 2 to 10? Well, 2 times 5 is 10. Is 5 times 5 25? Yes, it is. Fantastic. And then we have 2 to 20. How do I go from 2 to... That's multiplying by 10. So I'm going to multiply by 10 here. And if I multiply by 10 here, 5 times 10 is 50, which means that this is a ratio table. Awesome. Let's say that each student has to pay $8 for a field trip. How much do 2 students have to pay? How much do 3 students have to pay? So to go from 1 student to 2 students, I'd multiply by 2. So 8 times 2 is going to be 16. To figure out how much 3 students would cost, I would go back to the beginning and multiply by 3. So let's do the same on this side. 8 times 3 is 24, which means that 3 students would have to pay $24. You can also use a shortened form of a ratio table to figure out word problems. You don't have to put a whole bunch of levels into it. So, in the field trip problem, we were talking about 1 student, 2 students. What if we're talking about 11 students? So let's go ahead and figure out, what do I multiply to go from 1 to 11? Well, golly gee, 1 times 11 is 11. So let's go ahead and multiply 8 times 11. And 8 times 11 is 88. How much would 20 students have to pay? Go ahead, pause the video, figure that out. We'll talk about it when you come back. Welcome back. 20 students, if we go to the beginning and multiply by 20, both sides, so that would be 20 here, which would be 20 students, 8 times 20. Well, I know that 8 times 2 is 16. And then that's in the tens place, which means I just have to add the 0 onto the end of it. So 20 students will have to pay, I'm thinking wrong here, $160. That's what happens when you try to think ahead. So now they're asking you to complete the following ratio tables. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this ratio table. How do I go from 1 to 2? Well, I multiply by 2, which means that to get this square, I'd also multiply by 2. 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. Go ahead, pause the video, try both of these, and we'll talk about it when you come back. Welcome back! To get to the next one, how do we get to 3? We multiply by 3, which means on this side, 4 times 3 is 12. And then on this side, we don't know what to multiply here yet, but I do know that this is multiplying 4 times 4 is 16. So over here, I'm going to multiply by the same thing, and I'm going to get 4. Hooray! On this side, 3 to 6, I'm multiplying by 2. So I would also multiply that 4 by 2 to get 8. To get to 12, 4 times 3 is 12, so I'd multiply 3 times 3 and get 9. To get from 3 to 12, that's going to be different. That's going to be 3 times 4, which means I'm going to multiply 4 times 4 to get 16. And maybe a neater writing system. Go ahead, give this one a shot, and we'll talk about it when you come back. Welcome back! So to go from 1 to 3, you multiply by 3, which means over here we multiply by 3, and we get 3 times 3 is 9. To go from 3 to 12, we multiply by 4, so we're going to multiply by 4 over here. 1 times 4 is 4, and then I don't know what to do for this one, so 3 times what is 3 times 7 is 27. So I'm also going to multiply this side times 7. Normally you can kind of write the numbers a little bit closer when you're doing these. However, I'm working with technology. So this last one, this one's a little bit more challenging to figure out because now we're missing that top number. Now we have to start off in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get that top number first. So I need to go backwards. How do I go from 3 to 1? I'm going to divide to make it smaller. I'm going to divide by 3, which means 15 divided by 3 is 5. Now that I know the ratio is 1 to 5, 5 times 2 gets me 10. Which means 1 times 2 gets me 2. And then to figure out this last one, to go from 1 to 8, I multiply times 8. 5 times 8 is going to be 40. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our video. Have a wonderful day. You got this.